What I am about to reveal will dismantle all your notions of the three wattle and what is truly happening in our solar system right now. While the world debates whether it's a comet or something entirely different, leaked documents and secret observations tell a story that governments don't want you to hear. A coronal mass ejection recently struck a triaxial object, and what happened next defies all known laws of physics. Instead of being destroyed or rejected, the object absorbed the energy of 1 trillion atomic bombs and transformed it into structured signals directed straight at Earth. The increase in brightness 40 times was not accidental. It was a controlled, deliberate act that no natural object could perform. But this is just the beginning. New calculations based on data from 227 observatories worldwide show that the 3 Atlas weighs at least 33 billion tons, making it denser than neutron star material. Yet somehow, it conceals its gravitational signature. Mathematics does not lie, but it tells us something that questions everything we knew about matter, energy, and the limits of technology. This is what they don't tell you. The 20 scientists who made contact were just the tip of the iceberg. Dozens of other researchers were forced to remain silent, their funding at risk and careers destroyed for asking the wrong questions. Meanwhile, deep space observation networks designed for military surveillance detected structured emissions from the 3 Huatlas, which do not match any known natural phenomenon. The time allocated for the 3 Atlas plan expires in a few weeks, not months. The December deadline is not speculation, but mathematics based on orbital mechanics and the most complex mission ever documented. Whether this is first contact or something much more sinister, the evidence suggests we are on the brink of discovering that humanity has never been alone in the universe. Before diving into this story, please leave a like and subscribe to stay updated, and comment on where you're listening from, what time it is, and the strangest thing that has ever happened to you. Chapter 1, September 19th, 2025, an unprecedented event occurred that shattered the comfortable consensus of the astronomical community. A research article appeared online with signatures from 20 scientists across 3 continents, and its explosive conclusions led to career threats, funding doubts, and the scientific community scrambling to contain what they saw as a dangerous breach of protocol. The article's title seemed simple at first glance: Statistical Analysis of the Trajectories, Anomalies of the Interstellar Object 3 Atlas. But within the dense mathematical formulations and cautious academic language lay a conclusion that had troubled astronomers for several weeks. These 20 explorers risked their professional reputations by making one horrifying statement. The object designated as 3I finally did not behave like any natural object should. The main author of the study was Dr. Ellen Avesks, a specialist in planetary dynamics from the European Southern Observatory. Her qualifications were impeccable, her methodology resourceful, and her conclusions catastrophic for traditional explanations. In the leaks of emails that later became available due to requests for information on academic freedom, she wrote to a colleague, "The data on the trajectory keeps me awake. We are observing precise navigation that could make the best spacecraft engineers envious. This is not a coincidence, it is not natural, and we need to start very difficult conversations about what it means." The central argument of the article was based on a statistical analysis so rigorous that even skeptics could find no flaws in it. When Triae was finally discovered, racing through space at nearly 200,000 kilometers per hour, its path seemed unremarkable, except for its obvious interstellar origin. It was just another cosmic drifter, ejected from some distant star system and wandering in the void for millions of years. However, as more observatories tracked its movement, a pattern emerged that contradicted any explanations. The object was not just passing through our solar system, it was approaching our 3 main planets, Venus, Mars, and Jupiter, with what researchers called impossible precision. The statistical probability of such alignments occurring randomly was less than 0.005%. Dr. James Chen, an astrodynamics specialist from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, who made significant calculations in the analysis, was trying to find earthly analogs to what they observed. Imagine you are standing in New York and throw a dart that hits a bullseye in London, then somehow bounces perfectly to hit bullseyes in Paris and Rome. This is essentially what we observe from Triae, although distances are measured in hundreds of millions of kilometers. It was the mathematical precision that made the article so destructive. These were not vague observations or subjective interpretations. The data on the trajectory was specific, verifiable, and accessible to any institution with computational resources for analysis. These 20 scientists simply made the calculations that others were afraid to undertake. Each approach to the planet was calculated with hourly precision. 3 AIs were to pass by Venus at a distance of zero point 0.2 astronomical units on October 15th. Mars was to be observed closer on October 3rd, with the object approaching to within 0.19 astronomical units. Jupiter, the giant of the solar system, will be explored from a distance of 0.36 astronomical units on March 16th of next year. However, the researchers were concerned not only about accuracy, but also about efficiency. If engineers had truly developed a device for exploring the main objects of the solar system, they could not have charted a more elegant route. The object's trajectory allowed for the collection of maximum data about each planet while expending minimal energy on course correction. Dr. Maria Santos, a mission planning specialist at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, who was not officially part of the research but independently verified the calculations, was forced to confront possibilities that challenged her worldview. We spend years planning trajectories for our own spacecraft to reach much simpler goals, she confessed to trusted colleagues. What we observe here represents a level of mission planning that could indicate incredible luck or intentional design. The article meticulously documented every aspect of trajectory analysis. Orbital mechanics calculations filled page after page. Each equation confirmed the undeniable conclusion that 3 ultimately followed a path that maximized scientific results while minimizing the risk of detection. It was a sign of intellectual mission planning. But perhaps the most troubling was the vector of the object's approach. Unlike typical interstellar visitors that enter the solar system at random angles, 3 ships arrived from the direction of Sagittarius, heading straight for the galactic center, where the density of background stars made early detection nearly impossible. It seemed as though the object had been intentionally hidden until the last moment. Its appearance raised just as many suspicions. The 3 and the Atlas were only spotted when they reached Jupiter's orbit, giving humanity just a few months for observation and analysis before disappearing behind the sun. A longer observation period would allow for a more detailed study, possibly revealing secrets that its creators would prefer to keep hidden. Dr. Robert Kim, a computer modeling specialist at Stanford, who has conducted thousands of simulations to verify trajectory calculations, began to doubt the assumptions he had stated throughout his career. Natural objects do not optimize their paths, he explained in private conversations. They follow the laws of physics, but do not demonstrate strategic thinking. What we see here looks like someone has paved this path with specific goals in mind. The academic reaction to the article was swift and harsh. Within 24 hours of its publication, senior astronomers from NASA, the European Space Agency, and leading universities worldwide released statements questioning the methodology, conclusions, and even the professional competence of the authors. Dr. Margaret Thompson, a leading NASA scientist on small bodies of the solar system, held an emergency press conference where she characterized the work as a speculative analysis that draws conclusions significantly beyond what the data supports. In her statement, she emphasized that 3 eyes, at last, demonstrated clear signs of being a natural comet, including observable gas emissions and a forming comet. However, the response from the institutional environment revealed serious issues. Instead of discussing the specific mathematical arguments presented in the article, critics focused on attacking the validity of the unorthodox conclusions. Data about the trajectory remained unanswered, as if acknowledging their accuracy would legitimize questions that the leadership preferred not to address. Dr. Ellen O. Vasquez found herself at the center of a professional storm. A department head at the European Southern Observatory called her in for a meeting to express concern about the viability of her research direction. Colleagues who had collaborated with her for many years suddenly became unavailable for meetings. The conference organizers began retracting speaking invitations. Other authors of the paper felt similar pressure. Dr. James Chen from MIT reported that his access to certain computational resources had quietly been restricted. Dr. Santos from JPL was excluded from the planning meetings for missions, where she had previously participated as expected. The message was clear. Challenging conventional wisdom had professional consequences. However, 20 scientists anticipated such a reaction. In private discussions, they talked about the risks of publication and agreed that the consequences were too significant to suppress for the sake of their careers. If they were right about the 3 eyes finally representing artificial intelligence, then humanity deserved to know about it, regardless of the convenience of institutions. The publication of the article triggered reactions far beyond the academic community. For several hours, it was downloaded more than 50,000 times. Science journalists tried to understand the technical details, seeking accessible explanations of the consequences. Heated discussions about aliens and government conspiracies erupted on social media platforms. Astronomy enthusiasts around the world began their own projects to analyze trajectories, using freely available orbital data to verify the calculations of a paper. Surprisingly, several independent analyses confirmed the mathematical conclusions, even when conducted by observers with no connection to the original researchers. The democratization of analysis created a problem for authorities trying to control the narrative. Unlike previous controversial astronomical claims that required specialized equipment or insider information, the data on the trajectory of Three Eyes finally was publicly accessible. Anyone with sufficient mathematical knowledge could confirm that the object's trajectory indeed had statistically anomalous characteristics. Online communities dedicated to tracking the phenomenon began to rapidly grow in number. Forums that previously attracted only a few hundred passionate amateur astronomers suddenly became platforms for discussions among thousands of participants, including professional scientists who preferred to remain anonymous to avoid jeopardizing their positions in institutions. 20 scientists awaited professional critique, but did not anticipate the immense public interest their work would generate. Dr. Vasquez later admitted she hoped for a quiet academic discussion about the methodology and conclusions. Instead, she found herself at the center of a global discussion about humanity's place in the universe. Intelligence agencies around the world took note of the article's conclusions and public reaction. Closed briefings were prepared for high-ranking officials, outlining the potential consequences of confirming that this phenomenon indeed represents artificial intelligence. The described scenarios were alarming, from peaceful scientific exchange to existential threats to human civilization. But perhaps the most significant was that the work achieved what decades of research in this field had not. She moved the possibility of contact with aliens from the realm of speculation to the field of peer-reviewed scientific analysis. 20 qualified researchers publicly stated that the evidence supports the artificial origin of the phenomenon. The scientific community found itself in a deadlock. The acknowledgement of the validity of the trajectory analysis would legitimize the possibility that humanity could be visited by extraterrestrial intelligence. Complete disregard for this work risked being seen as suppression of legitimate scientific inquiry. The solution seemed to be not mentioning the article at all, hoping that public interest would fade without institutional involvement. However, this strategy backfired. The silence from major astronomical institutions was perceived by many as confirmation that the conclusions of the article were too dangerous to discuss publicly. In the absence of official answers, conspiracy theories thrived, often offering explanations far more dramatic than those proposed by 20 scientists. Dr. Vasquez and her colleagues became unwanted celebrities. Their LinkedIn profiles were flooded with interview requests from podcasters, documentarians, and journalists worldwide. Most declined to participate, preferring their research to speak for itself rather than risking further issues in professional relationships. But the damage had already been done. The article added a level of scientific credibility to theories about alien visits that had never existed before. The mathematical precision of the trajectory analysis made it impossible to dismiss the conclusions as mere speculation or empty hopes. September came to an end, and October began. An object named Three Eyes continued its relentless journey through the solar system, seemingly oblivious to the chaos it was causing on Earth. Every day brought new observations, new data that either confirmed or refuted various theories about its nature. This object became more than just an astronomical curiosity. It became a test of humanity's readiness to confront possibilities that questioned our fundamental assumptions about our place in the universe. And 20 scientists, daring to publish their analyses, ensured that these possibilities could no longer be ignored. The data about the trajectory does not lie. Three Eyes followed a path that indicated intentional design rather than randomness. Whether this structure originated from natural processes not yet understood by human science, or from an intelligence not belonging to Earth, remained to be seen. But one thing was clear. The comfortable assumption that humanity is alone in the universe was undermined at its core by 20 researchers willing to follow the data wherever it led, regardless of personal and professional losses. The shocking news was announced. Now the question was whether the scientific community and all of humanity as a whole were ready to cope with the consequences. Chapter 2. Loeb's theory of the mothership is gaining popularity. Garvey Leo built a career on thinking about what no one dared to dream. As a junior professor of science at Harvard University and the longest-serving chair in the history of the astronomy department, he earned the right to speculate on ideas that could end the careers of less fortunate scholars. But even by his standards, what he published on his blog on August 5, 2025, was truly revolutionary. The publication began with Lyob's characteristic blend of strict mathematics and accessible exposition, describing the main parameters of the three eyes in terms understandable to both colleagues and the general public. He discussed the size, speed, and trajectory of the object with the clinical precision that made him one of the world's most respected astrophysicists. But then came the paragraph that was screenshotted, shared, and analyzed by millions of people around the world. From an engineering perspective, a more likely scenario, wrote Lyob, with the calm authority of years of experience in theoretical physics, involves a mothership releasing mini-probes that perform a deceleration maneuver at perihelion and intercept Earth using the sun's gravitational assist. The term mothership itself became the cause of a media storm that raged for weeks. But Lyob was not going to simply abandon this concept and return to academic safety. He began to describe in detail how such a deployment could occur, backing up his words with calculations showing that small probes could reach Earth just a few months after being released from the main body. According to his models, the timing would be precise and frightening. The deployment will occur at the moment when three eyes reach their closest point to the sun for the last time, at the moment when the object will be hidden from observation from Earth behind the blinding disk of our star. According to Lyob's calculations, the arrival window for any launched probes would be from November 21st to December 5th, 2025. The consequences of this were simply astounding. If Lyob is right, humanity is witnessing not just an alien visitor passing through our solar system, but a stage of unfolding that could be either the greatest scientific mission in history or something much more sinister. Harvard professor tried not to speculate about intentions, but the internet had no such restrictions. 6 hours after publication, Lyob's post was viewed over 800,000 times. By the end of the first day, that number exceeded 2 million. News agencies around the world tried to contact him for an interview, but the physicist seemed to have vanished from public view. His university email replied with an automatic message stating he was unavailable for comments, and his research assistant claimed to know nothing of his whereabouts. It was a terrible time for NASA and other space agencies which were already struggling to control the narrative surrounding the three-eyed atlas. As soon as they thought they had successfully characterized the object as an unusual, yet ultimately natural phenomenon, one of the most respected astrophysicists in the world publicly suggested that it might be an alien mothership preparing to unleash what could be called an invasion force. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, NASA's astrobiology director, and a longtime colleague of Lyob, found herself in an impossible situation, answering questions about theories proposed by a man she considered a friend and mentor. Professor Lyob's speculations go far beyond what available information can support, she stated at an emergency press conference. While we respect his contribution to astrophysics, these particular ideas are assumptions rather than scientific analysis. However, Mitchell's restrained response was drowned out by the wave of public reaction triggered by Lyob's post. Social media experienced an unprecedented surge of traffic as people shared theories, fears, and preparations for what many called the most significant event in human history. The hashtag Alien Mothership quickly gained popularity worldwide, accumulating over 10 million posts in just the first week. Survival equipment sellers reported a sharp increase in sales as people prepared for scenarios they couldn't clearly articulate, but felt the need to anticipate. Emergency food supplies, water purification systems, and communication equipment flew off the shelves. In several major cities, spontaneous protests took place demanding the government reveal information about a mysterious object, with demonstrators holding signs that read, "Tell us the truth about the three-eyed atlas," and "We have the right to know what awaits us." The scientific community was deeply divided due to Lyob's interference. Some colleagues admired his willingness to explore unconventional possibilities, while others worried that his speculations undermined trust in serious astronomical research. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, an astrophysicist from the University of Chicago, expressed the dissatisfaction of many when she told a science journalist, "Avi always pushed boundaries, and that was valuable for the field. But now everything is different. It seems he has completely lost scientific caution." Nevertheless, Lyob's analysis was not based on mad assumptions or unfounded dreams. His concept of the Oberth maneuver was grounded in established principles of orbital mechanics, a method that engineers had been using for decades to control the trajectories of spacecraft. The idea was to use the gravitational influence of a celestial body to change the speed and direction of a vehicle, but in reverse, slowing it down instead of speeding it up. Dr. James Harrison, an engine specialist from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, who worked on several Mars missions, reluctantly confirmed the theoretical validity of Lyob's scenario. In the reviewed article, published just weeks after Lyob's blog, Harrison demonstrated that the concept of the Oberta reverse maneuver is not only possible, but optimal for the mission described by Leo. If you were designing an interstellar mission to place probes in an alien solar system, Harrison wrote with cautious academic language that nonetheless supported Loeb's main thesis. This approach would maximize efficiency while minimizing the risk of detection. It represents elegant engineering that any mission planner would admire. The academic rigor of Harrison's analysis made it impossible for the authorities to dismiss the mothership theory as pure fantasy. He was a NASA scientist publishing in a respected journal, confirming that the scenario of an alien deployment is not only possible, but logical. These endorsements sparked new waves of speculation in both scientific and popular media. Radio enthusiasts around the world suddenly found themselves at the center of an investigation into a three-eyed atlas. Many of these radio amateurs who had been following the object since its discovery began reporting unusual signals that seemed to correlate with the timeline of Loeb's deployment. The signals were weak and intermittent, easily dismissed as equipment malfunction or earthly interference, but their timing was too coincidental to ignore. Chen Marker, a retired electronics engineer and amateur radio enthusiast from New Mexico, was one of the first to notice the structured patterns in the signals he received. "I have been listening to space for 40 years, he explained in a YouTube video that quickly garnered over 3 million views. "I know what cosmic background radiation sounds like. I know the sound of pulsars, but this is different. It's almost organized, as if carrying information." After independent audio experts analyzed it, Chen's recording revealed distinct mathematical patterns, which some interpreted as attempts at artificial communication. The signals appeared to be based on prime numbers and the Fibonacci sequence, statistically unlikely to arise naturally, yet completely consistent with how human scientists might try to demonstrate intelligence to extraterrestrial observers. This sparked sharp divisions in the amateur radio community about the implications of these observations. Some operators reported their equipment also detected similar signals, while others insisted they heard nothing unusual. An online forum dedicated to radio astronomy has turned into a battleground between believers and skeptics, with escalating debates over data interpretation and methodology. Government agencies face an information management crisis, as they have in the past. Acknowledging amateur radio reports would enhance the credibility of positive communication, while outright dismissal could be seen as suppressing legitimate scientific data. The chosen solution seems to be silence, a strategy that only fuels more conspiracy theories. Meanwhile, Loeb's mothership concept unexpectedly gained support in aerospace engineering. Computer simulations conducted by independent researchers confirm that his proposed deployment strategy is indeed the best choice for interstellar reconnaissance missions. The mathematics is elegant, the physics sound, and the tactical advantages undeniable. Lisa Park, a systems engineer at MIT, publishes a detailed analysis of Loeb's concept, causing a stir in both scientific and military circles. Her work indicates that theoretically, 3I could deploy dozens of small probes while maintaining the main trajectory, creating a comprehensive inner solar system survey network. The deployment pattern described by Loeb would allow for systematic reconnaissance of all major planetary bodies while ensuring operational safety. Parker's language in his article resembles a military briefing rather than an academic paper. This represents a complex task planning that surpasses our current capabilities. The international community's reaction to Loeb's theory reveals deep concerns from governments around the world regarding 3I. Space agencies that initially rejected theories of extraterrestrial origins began to cautiously formulate their statements about ongoing research and the changing understanding of the situation. Russia's response was particularly telling. Dmitry Volkov, head of the Institute of Space Research of the Russian Academy of Sciences, gave an interview to state media, proposing immediate expansion of international cooperation in monitoring. This object represents phenomena that no country can fully understand alone, he stated with unusual directness. We must combine our resources and share data if we hope to comprehend what we observe. The Chinese National Space Administration, usually secretive about space surveillance, suddenly began sharing detailed tracking data with international partners. This unprecedented discovery raised questions about what exactly the Chinese scientists might have found that prompted them to break a long-standing policy on information exchange. The European Space Agency took an unusual step by convening an emergency meeting of its Space Situational Awareness Program, bringing together experts from across the continent to assess the implications of scenario LOB. Although the official result of this meeting was never made public, a leak of documents revealed that the agency was quietly developing plans for potential contact with aliens. Social media faced challenges in managing the explosive growth of content related to the mothership LOB theory. Conspiracy theories multiplied exponentially, mixing legitimate scientific concerns with wild speculations about alien invasions and government conspiracies. The algorithms of recommendation systems amplified the most appealing content, which often turned out to be the most sensational and least accurate. The psychological impact of the LOB scenario began to manifest in measurable forms. Mental health professionals reported a significant increase in requests related to anxiety, especially from people obsessed with calculating vectors of approach and deployment timelines. Support groups have formed online for those experiencing what psychologists have begun to call contact anxiety, the fear that humanity is not ready for what may happen. Religious communities have faced theological questions they have never seriously considered. Some leaders interpreted the three eyes as a sign of divine intervention, while others saw it as a test of faith. The Vatican issued a carefully worded statement acknowledging that divine creation encompasses infinite possibilities, emphasizing that fear should not overshadow trust in providential guidance. But perhaps the most alarming was the analysis of LOB, which he called the advantage of hidden deployment. According to his calculations, any probes released by three eyes during a solar approach would be virtually indistinguishable until they chose to reveal their presence. The combination of sunlight and the assumed small size of the probes made tracking them impossible using modern technology on Earth. The deployment window provided perfect cover for operations. Loeb wrote in his subsequent post, which attracted even more attention than his initial theory, that any released objects would be hidden by solar radiation, lost in the electromagnetic chaos of our star's immediate surroundings. By the time they are discovered, they will already be where their mission requires them. The consequences of this ability to camouflage were profound. If the LOB is right, humanity may remain completely unaware of the deployment of probes until the objects decide to make contact or reveal their presence. The possibility of aliens operating unnoticed around Earth represented a fundamental shift in humanity's understanding of planetary security. Intelligence agencies worldwide faced scenarios for which their training had not prepared them. The possibility that Earth will soon become a habitat for alien technology has shifted from the realm of science fiction to operational planning reality. Monitoring networks for deep space designed to track asteroids and debris suddenly gained national significance for security. However, the LOB remained mysteriously absent from the public discourse triggered by his theory. Colleagues reported that he canceled all performances and conferences. His office at Harvard remained empty, and department staff claimed they did not know where he was or if he was available. The disappearance of such a prominent figure only fueled rumors about his dramatic involvement in the discussions of the three and the last. The mothership theory fundamentally changed the conversation about the mysterious visitor of humanity. What began as a scientific interest in an unusual comet evolved into a global concern about potential contact with aliens. And, as the deployment window was rapidly approaching, the stakes rose with each passing day. Chapter 3. Usually vigilant, Dr. Michael Jang was conducting routine photometric observations at the European Southern Observatory when he noticed something that would fundamentally change the scientific understanding of the three and the last. It happened on September 27, 2025, shortly after 2 o'clock in the morning local time, when his instruments recorded data that made him doubt the calibration of the equipment. Three and last were increasing. This was not the typical expansion that astronomers expect from comets as they approach the sun, developing longer tails and larger comas from sublimating ice. Jang's measurements indicated that the object's solid core appeared to be physically expanding, developing new structural features that had not existed in previous observations. Jang spent the next 4 hours double-checking his data, convinced that he had made some fundamental mistake in his analysis. He reviewed his calibration procedures, meticulously checked the equipment for malfunctions, and even reanalyzed months of archival observations to ensure he hadn't missed anything obvious. But every test confirmed the same impossible conclusion. The object, called Tri-Eye, was ultimately actively changing its physical structure. The first thing any scientist does when faced with abnormal data is to assume they made a mistake. Later, Jang explained at an emergency press conference hastily organized by the European Southern Observatory. I checked everything twice, then again. I invited colleagues to confirm my method, but the evidence was undeniable. This object transforms in a way that challenges our fundamental understanding of celestial bodies. Zhang's discovery triggered an immediate mobilization of telescopes worldwide. Every major observatory capable of tracking Tri-I was engaged in emergency observations, creating an unprecedented international monitoring network. The data received over the next 72 hours painted a picture that no textbook had prepared scientists to interpret. High-quality images from the Hubble Space Telescope showed geometric structures emerging from the surface of the object, not random chaotic formations typical of comet activity or debris shedding. They were organized, symmetrical, and seemed to grow in coordinated patterns that indicated deliberate construction rather than natural evolution. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, an imaging specialist at the Space Telescope, who was initially skeptical of alien theories, found herself confronted with data that challenged everything she thought about celestial objects. After 18 continuous hours of analyzing observations from Hubble, she was finally ready to present conclusions that would shock the astronomical community. "We observed the emergence of structures that show clear signs of geometric organization," she announced at an emergency press briefing that gathered more than 5 million viewers. "These formations demonstrate symmetry, coordination, and growth that do not correspond to known natural processes. The structures seem to extend from specific points on the surface of Tri-I, growing in configurations resembling antennas or sensor arrays. Spectroscopic analysis revealed that they are composed of materials fundamentally different from the main body, with absorption lines corresponding to complex metallic compounds rather than the expected mix of ice and stones typical of comets. What made the observations even more disturbing was the speed of the changes. Photos with temporal interpolation showed how structures grew and moved in real time, with movements occurring too quickly to be explained by thermal expansion, gravitational forces, or any other natural mechanism that scientists could identify. Astronomy enthusiasts with modern equipment began reporting their observations of growing structures, confirming that this phenomenon is not limited to just a few professional observatories. Carlos Mendez, whose home observatory in Chile could rival many institutional facilities, captured video footage that garnered over 15 million views in the first week of viewing. "Я занимаюсь фотографированием объектов глубокого космоса уже 20 лет. Объяснил Мендес в своем теперь уже известном комментарии на YouTube, который сопровождал таймлапс. "Я понимаю ограничения оборудования, атмосферные искажения и артефакты изображения." What we see here is not any of those factors. We are observing something that is actively restructuring in real time, occurring at a scale and speed that defy natural explanation. The recording showed 3 objects over 12 hours of observation, with clear signs of not only new structures growing, but also their movement and change in position. The consequences were astonishing. If the observations were accurate, they had witnessed technologies and processes, not natural phenomena. The scientific community plunged into chaos as researchers struggled to comprehend observations that contradicted decades of established beliefs. Emergency meetings were convened at NASA headquarters, the European Space Agency, and major universities around the world. The review processes, which usually took months, were condensed to a few days as scientists rushed to publish their analyses of the rapidly changing situation. However, perhaps the most alarming were the messages from the radio telescopes that monitored objects for electromagnetic emissions. Signals that were once weak and intermittent suddenly became strong and stable, with bursts of transmission that precisely matched the emergence of each new physical structure. Dr. Frank Wilson, the director of the National Radio Astronomy Observatory, found himself in an unprecedented situation, acknowledging observations that questioned his long-standing commitment to traditional scientific explanations. "We are recording structured electromagnetic emissions that directly correlate with visual observations of physical changes in the object," he confessed at a brief